The rail expenditure that we were hearing about earlier in that piece from Laura Tupou about the line to Northland is one example of the new government targeting regional development. The planting of 1 billion trees over 10 years is another. Job creation in areas of high unemployment is a central objective. But will the creation of jobs alone be enough? Canterbury argues yes, the country's lowest regional unemployment rate is in the area rebuilding after major earthquakes. But Shane Jones thinks that in some areas of high unemployment, like Northland, despite the rail line and despite the trees, both a carrot and a stick will be required. A carrot in terms of the jobs themselves and a stick in terms of the response to unemployed people who refuse to accept work when jobs are available. I spoke to the new Regional Economic Development Minister this afternoon.
Look, the billion-dollar planting strategy throughout the regions is going to have to deal with the fact that many of our younger Māori men in areas such as Kaitaia and Kaikohe are not work ready. Many of them are already in the receipt of the dole or other types of benefit. And I'm as keen as mustard to see the a billion tree strategy at an entry level, bringing young men in particular and women back into the workforce, teaching structure, teaching things that in my generation we took for granted. And if it needs a bit of stick as well as carrot, then that really speaks to the values that I bring forward as a politician.
If we look at that area that you talked about, Kaitaia West, for example, the 2013 census, the unemployment rate there was 19%. There aren't jobs. Now, if you're creating jobs, that's a good thing, isn't it? That's not a work for the dole situation, that's just a work situation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, though, that employers in the north have to be respected as well. Many of them tell me, John, that, and I'm using the term nephew figuratively, the reality is a lot of our young men, they've got other lifestyle problems, lifestyle addictions, etc., and I want to work with them. But I am not a supporter where jobs will be created by dint of our climate change and billion tree strategy. The jobs are there; they will be working. I'm not in agreement for our own people to be whiling their time away on the dole. I'd rather have them work ready, and this billion tree strategy over a 9-year period is certainly going to be job rich.
So you are creating work. Why do you have to wrap it in this kind of punitive language? Isn't job creation a good thing? Won't people rise to the occasion if there are jobs for them to do?
Well, that's my hope, but I do know by talking to employers, it's going to take as much as stick as carrot.
So if you're going to plant 1 billion trees and you are creating the very large number of jobs that will inevitably, of course, be associated with this, why do you think a stick is required? Don't you think people will look up and think, meaningful employment, thank God I'm off? Or do you have a sense that there are people who, for whatever reason, and I'd love you to explain that, those reasons, still won't want to participate?
Well, I think sustained bouts of unemployment in our rural Māori communities is not a problem we can simply explain away with academic language. I'm talking about young people who have seen their parents in a largely unemployed state, and unfortunately they've grown up in circumstances where hopping into the labour market and then using that as a trajectory to go on and do something else hasn't happened. Now, whether or not they will all respond to entry-level jobs planting trees, I hope that is the case. Where it's not the case, I don't think it's acceptable for my young people in the north, where there are jobs, where they offer a very good starting wage, that they should remain in beneficiary country. I just don't agree with that at all.
So what will you do? So this is where the stick comes in, right? What will the stick be? How will it work?
Oh, well, in terms of the application of the stick, obviously I have to talk that through with my colleagues, John, in fairness to them, but no one should be under any illusions. What mix of whakaaro and feelings I bring to this task. I have a view about pockets of our young people that, sure, a job through this climate change strategy of 1 billion trees will be available, and they will be trained to take it, but there's got to be within their own spirit a willingness to change their lives, take on this role, and improve the lives of their families. And I may be talking more as a Māori than a politician, but I'm also talking as a senior member of my own community.
Yes, you are. And you're from Awanui, right, which is a short drive from Kaitaia, which has had that unemployment rate peaking at about 20%, 1 in 5, which is such a terrible figure. And I want to look at your story, because I was just reading your maiden speech, and you've had an extraordinary life, and it seems to me you responded to the carrot, which was the support of the local community, and you ended up at Vic, at Auckland, you went to Harvard, right?
Yeah, Dad was one of 17 children in Awanui, and our grandmother was a stalwart at our local Anglican church. And when I was 12 years old, the Anglican church gave my mum and dad and me a scholarship, and I was the lad from our community who won that scholarship to go to St. Stephen's School.
That's right.
I have never, ever once walked away from a sense of obligation to give something back to the people who saved their pennies and sent me to St. Stephen's School. And when I won my scholarship, or shall I say when I was awarded the scholarship to go to Harvard, I had handsome offers. I had handsome offers to stay in America in 1991. But it may sound a bit corny and old-fashioned. I had been ably assisted by my then boss, Dr. Roger Blakely. I was assisted also by Royce Elliott, who chose me to be a Harkness Fellow. There was nothing else I was going to do, buddy, than come back and work amongst my fellow Kiwis in whatever industry opportunity afforded me, and I've never ever shirked from that.
Doesn't that wonderful story speak to what happens when early interventions are meaningful, when we stop Māori children dropping out of school, when we give Māori children a sense of possibility, when we enable and ennoble by giving kids aspirations? In other words, isn't your stick still the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff?
Well, I have a great deal to do with deal to do with our Māori community. I never wear it on my sleeve. I am a contributor to initiatives in our community, and I never ever want any recognition for the ways that I contribute, such as helping out our rangatahi who went down to the Māori Rugby League tournament in Rotorua. So my approach is a mix of compassion, but my approach also is reflective of my upbringing. And in that part of provincial New Zealand, where you are likely to hear in the Māori language, mā te wera wera, which means by the sweat of thy brow, as well as having a hand up. And the church certainly gave me that to go away to St. Stephen's School, and the contributions of my mother and father. I shouldn't deprecate that. So I think that my style of dealing with our rangatahi and with families is to call it as it is. There are pockets of dysfunctionalism, and I don't think you can rely purely on people to see the opportunity in its full, to its full extent, until they're jolted from the lifestyle choices that they've made.
Shane Jones.